Beneath it, in smaller black letters, she had pressed into the wood with a fine brush and a steady grip. Grip fair weight cash tender zero favors. Her father's words. Arthur Art Vance had said them so many times in his Koreatown shop that Sadie used to think they were printed on the walls. Now they were. She touched the bottom edge of the sign the way she always did, 2 fingers just for a second, and felt something in her chest loosen slightly, the way a bolt does when you finally apply the right torque. She was underneath the East Bay checking the hydraulic line she had installed the night before when she heard it. Not an engine in good health. A rattling, wheezing drag from a tired drivetrain, the specific complaint of a 2009 Honda Odyssey with a worn front stabilizer bar link. She knew that sound. She had fixed that exact van 3 years ago, back when she was still running Vance Mobile Repair out of her F-250 and charging $60 for a house call just to stay alive. Sadie rolled out from under the bay, wiped her hands on her shop rag, and stood up straight. The minivan pulled through the open gate and stopped crooked in the gravel. The sliding door banged open before the engine cut off, and Leo, 8 years old sneakers that lit up red with every step, jumped down and immediately started dragging the toe of his shoe through the gravel in wide figure eights. Behind him, Ruby, 5 years old, clutched a stuffed bear so hard its ear was bent sideways. She looked out at the yard with eyes still puffy from sleep, like she had been woken up and put in the van before she had a chance to ask where they were going. Then Clara Vance Boone stepped out. Sadie's younger sister was 34 years old and looked in this moment like someone who had been carrying something too heavy for too long and had finally decided to put it down on Sadie's porch. Her hair was unbrushed. She wore a gray zip-up hoodie with a stain near the pocket that she hadn't bothered to treat. Behind her, through the rear windshield, Sadie could see the van packed to the ceiling. Black garbage bags, a rolled foam mattress tied with yellow rope, a wheeled suitcase with one broken handle that Sadie had told her to throw away last Christmas. Clara's mouth curved into the smile Sadie had been reading since they were children, the one that arrived just before a request too big to say directly. "Chioi," Clara said, her voice climbing soft and sweet like it always did when she needed something. "I was thinking just for a little while maybe me and the kids could—" "Clara!" Sadie's voice came out flat, not cruel, just the exact same tone she used when a customer tried to argue with a repair estimate. "How long has Wayne been gone?" Clara's smile flickered. Her chin dropped half an inch. "2 weeks. And the apartment? The landlord won't let me stay past the end of the month." Clara's voice cracked at the edge, and her eyes went bright and wet too fast, the way they did when the tears were real, and she hadn't planned them. "Sadie, I have nowhere. I have nowhere to take them." She gestured toward Leo and Ruby, her hand shaking visibly. "Ruby cried herself to sleep in the car last night. She keeps asking where Daddy went, and I don't know what to tell her because I don't know where he is." Her voice broke completely on the last word. She pressed the back of her wrist against her mouth, shoulders heaving, and Sadie felt something sharp move through her chest. Not softness exactly, but something adjacent to it. The kind of pain that comes from loving a person and being furious at them at the same time. Ruby had climbed down from the van. She walked across the gravel to Sadie and held up the stuffed bear with both hands, offering it the way children offer things when they don't know what else to do. Sadie crouched down to Ruby's level. She looked at the bear. She looked at Ruby's face seriously and tired and trusting in the way only a 5-year-old could be trusting. "His ears bent," Sadie said quietly. "I know," Ruby said. "Can you fix it?" Sadie reached out and gently straightened her ear. She held the bear for a moment before handing it back. Then she stood up, looked at Clara still pressing her wrist to her mouth, still shaking, and said, "Come inside. I'll make coffee. You're going to tell me everything, and I mean everything. And when you're done, I'm going to tell you what I can and cannot do. Are we clear?" Clara nodded hard, tears rolling freely now, her whole body sagging with relief at just being heard. Sadie turned and walked toward the shop. She did not feel relieved. She felt the specific weight of a decision arriving heavy, necessary, and already inevitable. The inside of the shop smelled like motor oil, cold concrete, and the faint sweetness of the drip coffee Sadie brewed every morning in a battered Mr. Coffee machine she had owned since her Koreatown days. She set two mugs on the work table, the only flat surface in the office not covered in repair logs, and sat across from Clara, who had both hands wrapped around her mug like it was the only warm thing left in the world. Leo had found a stack of old tire catalogs near the parts shelf and was flipping through them with surprising focus. Ruby sat on the floor beside him, bare and lap thumb hovering near her mouth, the way it did when she was trying hard not to cry again. Wayne left on a Thursday. Clara began, her voice thin and careful, like she was walking on ice she wasn't sure would hold. He said he had a job offer, oil field work outside Midland, Texas. Good money, he said. He'd send checks home every 2 weeks. She stopped, swallowed hard. He took the joint checking account down to $11 before he crossed the state line. I found out when my debit card declined at the Ralph's in Vermont. Sadie's jaw tightened. She kept her hands flat on the table. How much debt did he leave behind? She asked. Clara's eyes filled again, but she pushed through it, voice shaking. Credit cards are about $9,000 between 2 cards, and there's a personal loan. She hesitated, and something in that pause made Sadie's stomach drop before the words even came. I used an address for the loan paperwork, for the mailing address. I used this address, Sadie. Your address here. I didn't think Wayne said it would only be a few weeks, and I didn't want the letters going to the apartment because the landlord checks the... Clara. Sadie's voice came out sharper than she intended, and she saw Clara flinch. She pulled it back, steadied herself. How much is the loan? $14,000. The number landed in the room like something dropped from a height. Sadie stood up. She walked to the small window above the parts shelf and looked out at the gravel lot where the April sun was hitting the concrete block wall and bouncing back flat and white. Her heart was hammering in a way she recognized, not panic, not rage, but the specific physical response her body had to being blindsided by someone she had already been blindsided by before. She used my address. Before she even drove here, she had already pulled this place into her mess. She turned back around. You need to understand something, Sadie said, and her voice was steadier now, the way it got when she was working through a problem with her hands, methodical, deliberate. Using my business address for a loan you took out without telling me is not a small thing. Under federal law, misrepresenting a mailing address on loan documentation can be considered material misrepresentation to a lender. That means if that lender sends collection notices here, my business gets tangled in your debt. I won't let that happen. Clara pressed her hand over her mouth, tears spilling down both cheeks now, her shoulders shaking. I'm sorry, she choked out. Sadie, I'm so sorry, I didn't think it through. I was scared, and Wayne said a lot of things. Sadie came back to the table and sat down again, leaning forward. I need you to call that lender today. Give them your new address wherever you end up, and get my address removed from that account. Today, Clara, not tomorrow. Okay. Clara wiped her face roughly with her sleeve, nodding fast. Okay, I will. The shop was quiet for a moment, except for the sound of Leo turning catalog pages and the distant growl of a truck passing on Cesar Chavez. Then Clara looked up, eyes red and swollen, and asked the question she had been building toward since the van pulled through the gate. Can we stay here, just the 3 of us? Just until I figure something out? And there it was. Sadie looked at her sister and really looked at her, and felt the old familiar pull, the gravity of being the older one, the capable one, the one who had always been handed the weight because she could carry it. She had been carried since she was 19 years old. She had carried Travis Mercer's entire business on her back for 11 years and never had her name on a single piece of paper to show for it. She thought about Mercer Fleet and Diesel Repair in Vernon. She thought about the mornings she had unlocked that shop before Travis was even awake. She thought about Cody Briggs, 19 years old, when he first showed up not knowing a torque wrench from a breaker bar, and how she had trained him into a real mechanic while Travis took the client lunches and signed the contracts. She thought about the Los Angeles County fleet contract, 47 vehicles, her relationships, her work orders, her phone number in every fleet manager's contact list. All of it under Travis Mercer, sole proprietor. Not one line, not one word, not her name anywhere. She had given 11 years to a man who had made sure she would leave with nothing. She was not going to let this place become the next thing she built for someone else to live in. Clara, Sadie said, her voice quiet but absolute. I'm not going to answer that question today. You're going to make that call to the lender. Then we're going to talk again calmly, honestly, like two adults. But I need you to understand something before we go any further. She put both hands flat on the table between them. This shop has my name on it, just mine, and that is not something I will ever compromise, not for anyone, not even for you. Clara stared at her. Fresh tears tracked down her face, but she did not argue. She nodded once, small, tight, like it cost her something. Outside, Ruby had fallen asleep against Leo's shoulder, the stuffed bear tucked. The memory came back the way it always did. Not gently, not like something Sadie chose to revisit, but like a cold draft through a gap in a wall she thought she had sealed. It came when she looked at Clara's face across that work table, the particular way her sister's eyes went soft and wide when she wanted something. Sadie had seen that expression in a courtroom 3 years ago, aimed at a judge instead of at her. Stanley Mosque Courthouse, downtown Los Angeles, November. The rain that day had been the stubborn kind, not a California drizzle but something heavier, the kind that backed up the drains on Temple Street and made the marble lobby floors slick and dangerous. Sadie had worn her good blazer, the charcoal one she kept for client meetings, and her attorney, Elena Ortiz, had met her at the security line with a rolling briefcase and 4 accordion folders rubber-banded shut. "We're solid," Elena had told her, squeezing Sadie's arm at the elbow. Elena was 42, compact and precise, with the kind of professional calm that came from 15 years of California family law. Active appreciation is well established under California case law. You built that business. The numbers show it. We show the numbers. Sadie had believed her. She had sat through 2 hours of procedural motions and opening statements with her hands folded in her lap, heart hammering but controlled, telling herself the truth would be enough. It was enough until the bailiff called the next witness, Clara Vance Boone. The sound of her own sister's name in that room hit Sadie like a wrench dropped on bare concrete, sharp, ringing wrong. She felt her breath leave her body in one slow, involuntary push. She gripped the edge of the defendant's table so hard her knuckles went white, and Elena's hand shot out immediately to cover hers. "Breathe," Elena said quietly. "Don't react. Let me work." Clara walked to the stand in a navy blouse, the one Sadie had given her for her birthday 11 months earlier. She sat down, adjusted the microphone, and folded her hands the way someone does when they have practiced. Travis's attorney, David Carver, a polished man in a gray suit who smiled like he charged $800 an hour, led her through it like a careful walk through a minefield he had personally mapped. Under Carver's questioning, Clara described a version of Sadie that made Sadie's stomach turn, a wife who overspent on tools the shop didn't need, who was absent during critical contract negotiations, who helped out at the garage, the way a person helps out casually occasionally without real responsibility. Travis and Clara's telling had been the engine of everything. Sadie had been in the background. Sadie felt tears burning behind her eyes and forced them back with everything she had. Her jaw ached from clenching. She pressed her heel into the floor to keep her leg from shaking. Elena cross-examined hard. She produced invoice records, work order logs, the county fleet manager's direct emails addressed to Sadie, not Travis, for 3 consecutive years. She put Cody Briggs's training documentation on the records signed by Sadie. She laid out the business valuation, Mercer Fleet and Diesel, worth approximately $140,000, at the time of marriage appraised at $890,000 at the time of filing, a $750,000 increase. She argued clearly under In Remarriage of Decker that active appreciation driven by a spouse's direct labor was community property under California Family Code Section 760. Judge Patricia Hale listened, read the documents, asked 2 clarifying questions, and then delivered a ruling that Elena later described with careful professional restraint as not incorrect on its technical merits. Sadie received $40,000, 11 years, $40,000. She did not cry in this courtroom. She did not cry in the elevator. She cried in the parking structure on level B3 alone in the F-250, with the engine off and the windows fogging up from her breath, and she cried the way she almost never let herself cry, without control, without dignity. her whole chest heaving and her hands shaking against the steering wheel. Grief and rage so tangled together she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Elena found her 35 minutes later. She opened the passenger door, sat down, and did not offer comfort or strategy or next steps. She simply sat there, present, steady, until Sadie's breathing evened out on its own. "I want to know why," Sadie finally said, her voice raw and scraped clean. "Why did Clara do it?" "I'll find out," Elena said. 3 months later, Elena called with the answer. Brenda Hollis, the shop's bookkeeper, the woman Travis had been seeing behind Sadie's back, had come forward. Not out of guilt, as it turned out, but because Travis had made her a promise he hadn't kept a partnership stake in the business once the divorce was finalized. When the papers were signed and no partnership materialized, Brenda pulled the records she had kept for herself as insurance. She told Elena about a check for $18,000 drawn from a shell LLC called Mercer Property Holdings, paid to Wayne Boone's personal account 3 weeks before the court date. Debt clearance, for testimony. "She'll sign an affidavit," Elena had asked. "She'll give a statement," Brenda had said. "But she won't go back to court, she's scared." Elena had walked Sadie through the math honestly without a signed affidavit. The $18,000 was a wire transfer between two LLCs, circumstantial at best, insufficient for a criminal referral under California Penal Code Section 137, and far too thin to support an appeal. One reluctant witness who refused to testify under oath was not a case. It was a story. It was not the answer Sadie wanted. But it was the truth, and Sadie had always been better at handling truth than most people gave her credit for. She had let it go, not because it didn't matter, because she had already decided that her future was not going to be built in that courtroom. Now, sitting across from Clara in a shop that had her name above the door, Sadie came back to the present with a breath so controlled it could have torqued a cylinder head bolt. Clara was watching her with those same wide eyes, scared, sorry, wanting. The sister who had sat on the wrong side of a room for $18,000 was now asking to live in the house Sadie had bled 3 years to earn. "Go make that call to the lender," Sadie said. "Then we'll talk." 3 years earlier, Sadie Vance had moved into a room above a laundromat on Olympic Boulevard in Koreatown with $40,000 in a checking account, a Ford F-250, a Snap-on toolbox that had belonged to her father, and a rule she wrote on a note card and taped to the wall above the single bed. "Do not borrow what you cannot repay. Do not give what you cannot afford to lose." The laundromat belonged to Dottie Pruitt, 67 years old, a woman who had run that same storefront for 23 years and had known the Vance family since Sadie was in high school. Dottie had 3 rental conditions stated plainly at the door the day Sadie came to look at the room. No smoking, no noise after 10, and every Sunday morning Sadie came downstairs for coffee for a minimum 15 minutes, no exceptions. "I don't care if you've worked a 30-hour shift," Dottie had said, arms crossed, chin up, the posture of a woman who had outlasted several recessions and one very bad marriage. "Sunday morning, coffee. You don't get to disappear into that room and forget you're a human being." Sadie had agreed without argument. She had liked Dottie immediately, the directness of her, the complete absence of pity. The first year was the hardest. Sadie worked the overnight shift at a Genuine Parts Company warehouse on Washington Boulevard, 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., loading freight and pulling orders, $18 an hour, plus weekend differential. Days she ran Vance Mobile Repair out of the F-250, oil changes, brake jobs, transmission fluid flushes for delivery drivers, small restaurant owners, anyone who needed honest work at an honest price and couldn't afford to lose their vehicle for 3 days at a dealership. She carried her father's Snap-on box in the truck bed. She never went anywhere without it. By month 17, she had enough operating history to attempt something bigger. She filed a bid proposal with the Los Angeles County Fleet Services Division for a maintenance contract, the same class of contract she had managed under Travis's name for a decade. The county's procurement process under LA County Code Title II, Chapter 2.200, required a minimum of 2 years documented business history for primary contracts, plus general liability insurance of at least $1 million and a performance bond. Vance Mobile Repair had 17 months. Marcus Webb, 55, the county's fleet contract compliance officer, a careful man who had held that desk for 12 years and had seen enough inflated resumes to recognize a real one, reviewed her application and denied it on technical grounds. But he flagged her file internally with a single handwritten note: technical qualifications exceed category. Monitor for resubmission. He called her 8 months later with a subcontract offering 12 park patrol vehicles in the West Hollywood district. Smaller scope, faster approval track. Sadie accepted at the posted rate without negotiating because what she needed from Marcus Webb was not more money, it was a track record with his signature on it. She serviced those 12 vehicles for 18 months without a single missed appointment, a single late invoice, or a single callback complaint. Dottie watched all of it from the laundromat window and from the Sunday coffee table where Sadie came down every week, sometimes still in her work clothes, sometimes with grease under her nails that no amount of scrubbing had fully removed. Dottie never asked how things were going in a way that expected a particular answer. She just asked and listened and occasionally said something so plainly true that Sadie had to set her mug down and breathe for a second. "You know what I notice about you," Dottie said one Sunday about 18 months in pouring a second cup without being asked. "You never talk about being tired. You just keep going. That's not strength, baby. That's a habit. Make sure you know the difference." Sadie had thought about that for a long time afterward. The meeting with Hank Callahan happened on a Tuesday in February on the shoulder of Highway 19 north of Pomona, where Sadie had pulled over to help a driver whose temperature gauge had buried itself in the red. The vehicle was a 1994 Chevy Silverado, the kind of truck that had been repaired so many times, it was more repair than original. And the man sitting on the front bumper with his arms crossed and his jaw set, like he was personally offended by the breakdown, was 72 years old, and introduced himself by saying, "Hank Callahan. I used to fix these myself, but my hands don't cooperate the way they used to." The problem was a cracked coolant reservoir hairline fracture near the upper seam, the kind that weeps slowly until the system loses pressure and the engine decides it's had enough. Sadie had a replacement reservoir in the truck bed that fit close enough to work as a temporary fix, and the whole job took 40 minutes. While the engine cooled, Hank looked at her truck, the way mechanics look at other people's equipment, not rudely, but professionally taking inventory. He saw the snap-on box. He went still in the specific way people go still when they recognize something. "That's a 1974 KRL series," he said. "Cherry condition. Where'd you get it?" "My father," Sadie said. "Art Vance. He ran a shop in Koreatown." Hank's expression shifted into something Sadie hadn't seen directed at her in a long time: straightforward respect, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. "Art Vance," Hank said. "I bought my first MIG welder from your father in 1987. He could have sold me a cheaper one and I wouldn't have known the difference. He didn't." He paused. "Good man." Sadie's throat tightened unexpectedly, a swift burning clench behind her sternum that she hadn't prepared for. She pressed her lips together and nodded. "Good man," she agreed. Hank handed back her business card. She had given it to him while she worked and looked at it for a moment before tucking it into his shirt pocket. "I've been trying to sell my shop for 8 months," he said. 3 buyers. None of them were the right kind of people." He looked at her directly the way old tradesmen do when they've decided something. "I'll call you." He did. 2 weeks later, at 7:45 on a Thursday morning, Sadie was pulling a seized caliper bolt on a customer's Silverado when her phone rang and changed the direction of everything. Hank Callahan's phone call lasted 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Sadie knew because she was still holding the seized caliper bolt in her left hand when it ended, and she stood there in the cold morning air of the Pomona storage yard, staring at nothing in particular, turning the bolt over and over in her fingers, while her brain ran the numbers he had just given her. The shop: Callahan Motors, on Cesar Chavez Avenue in East Los Angeles. One main bay, with a 2-post lift, a secondary bay with a floor jack setup, a parts room, a small office, and a 2-bedroom house attached to the back of the property through a shared breezeway. The whole parcel was zoned M11 Light Manufacturing under the City of Los Angeles Municipal Code, which permitted automotive repair as a primary use. Hank had owned it outright since 1991. No liens, no back taxes. He wanted $260,000. I had it appraised, Hank said over the phone. A fellow named Rick Dominguez out of Pomona has been doing commercial property assessments for 30 years. He came in at 285. I'm asking 260 because the roof needs work and the three-phase electrical panel doesn't meet current code. I'm not hiding anything. Sadie had said, I appreciate that, and meant it completely. She called Elena Ortiz before she called anyone else. Elena drove out to the property on a Thursday afternoon, walked every square foot of it with a legal pad and a flashlight, and spent 45 minutes on the phone with a commercial real estate attorney she trusted. Her assessment was direct. The seller financing structure Hank proposed $40,000 down, the remaining $220,000 at 5.5% fixed. Interest paid directly to Hank on a monthly schedule was entirely legal under California Civil Code Section 2924 for the real property component and UCC Article 9 for the equipment and fixtures. Elena would draft the security agreement and deed of trust herself. The transaction would be recorded with the LA County Recorder's Office. This is a good deal, Elena told her, standing in the empty second bay, with dust motes floating in the afternoon light coming through the high windows. Not because he's doing you a favor, because the numbers are honest. That's the only kind of deal I take, Sadie said. They signed the paperwork on a Friday morning in early March at a table in the back office of Callahan Motors, with Rick Dominguez present as the neutral third-party witness Hank had requested. Rick was 54, broad-shouldered, with the handshake of a man who had spent his career making sure nobody got cheated on either side of a transaction. He witnessed both signatures notarize the deed of trust and said when it was done, "Clean deal, good for both of you." Hank handed Sadie the keys, two of them on a plain steel ring, no ceremony, and said the one personal thing he allowed himself. "Your father would have done the same thing for someone he believed in. I'm just returning something to where it belongs." Sadie's eyes burned. She pressed her back teeth together hard enough to feel it in her jaw, breathed in slowly through her nose, and said, "Thank you, Hank." She did not cry until he had driven away. She stood in the middle of the main bay, keys in her fists, the smell of old oil and concrete and decades of honest work around her, and let the tears come. Not the wrecked, gasping kind from the parking garage 3 years ago, but something quieter and more complicated, the kind of crying that happens when something you stopped believing in turns out to be real after all. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, picked up her father's toolbox, and carried it inside. The sign went up the following week. She painted it herself, 2 coats, navy blue letters on raw wood, Vance Heavy and Auto Repair. And beneath it, in careful black, fair weight, cash tender, 0 favors. She also filed the necessary paperwork to add her business address to the LA County Small Business Enterprise Registry, updated her general liability policy to reflect the new fixed location, and notified Marcus Webb's office in writing that Vance Heavy and Auto Repair was now a brick-and-mortar operation eligible for primary contract consideration. Marcus Webb's assistant sent back a 2-line acknowledgement the same afternoon. Marcus himself added a note at the bottom in the pen. "Good. We'll be in touch." 5 weeks passed. The hydraulic lift worked. The roof held. The coffee machine ran every morning. Cody Briggs showed up on day 3 because he had heard through the East LA mechanic network that Sadie Vance had her own shop, and he walked in at 7 a.m. with his own tools in a canvas bag and said, "I heard you might need someone. I work hard and I don't steal." Sadie had looked at him, 23 years old, Ernest, the same kid she had trained at Mercer Fleet 4 years ago, and said, "Flat rate, no drama, no shortcuts. Are you good with that?" "Yes, ma'am," Cody said. "Don't call me ma'am," Sadie said. "It makes me feel like I'm 50. Those 5 weeks were the quietest, most complete weeks Sadie Vance had known in a long time. She woke up each morning in a house with her name on the deed. She went to bed each night having earned exactly what she charged and charged exactly what she earned. She ran her palm along the bottom edge of the sign each morning and felt her father's words hold steady beneath her hand, load-bearing like the best kind of structure always is. Then one morning in April, she heard a familiar engine coming up, Cesar Chavez Avenue, wheezing, rattling, dragging on a worn stabilizer bar link. She had fixed herself 3 years ago, and she knew before she turned around that the quiet was over. Clara made the call at 11:17 that morning, standing in the gravel lot with her back to the shop and her free hand pressed flat against the side of the minivan like she needed something solid to hold on to. Sadie watched through the office window without meaning to, not eavesdropping, just present the way you're present when something important is happening 10 feet away and the glass between you is thin. The call took 9 minutes. When Clara came back inside, her eyes were dry, but her hands were shaking, fingers curled tight around the phone like it had burned her. "Done," Clara said. "I gave them the apartment address of the old one and told them to update the account. They said it takes 3 to 5 business days to process." She set the phone on the work table and looked at Sadie directly, something she hadn't quite managed all morning. "I'm sorry, Sadie. I mean it. I wasn't thinking about what it would do to your business. I was just scared and I wasn't thinking." Sadie felt the apology land somewhere real. She didn't dismiss it, and she didn't expand on it. "I know," she said. "We'll talk more tonight. Right now, I need to finish the brake job in Bay 2 before my 2 o'clock shows up." Clara nodded, gathered Leo and Ruby, and moved them to the small waiting area near the front window. 2 plastic chairs and an end table with a stack of outdated Motor Trend magazines that had come with the shop. Ruby immediately pulled the stuffed bear into her lap and fell asleep sitting up the way only small children can. Leo found a magazine with a Corvette on the cover and held it with both hands like it was something sacred. The 2 o'clock never came. Instead, at 1:45, a Ram 1500 in black pulled through the gate and parked crooked across 2 spaces, the way people park when they own the concept of space itself. Sadie was under the Chevy Tahoe and when she heard the boots on the concrete, a specific heavy stride she would have recognized in a rainstorm. She rolled out from under the vehicle, sat up, and looked at Travis Mercer standing in the middle of her shop. He looked the same. That was the thing about Travis. He always looked the same, like consequences had a policy of going around him. Dark hair, clean jaw, the kind of easy confidence that came from 43 years of having things work out. He was wearing a jacket she didn't recognize. Everything else was exactly as she remembered. Sadie. He said her name like a greeting and an apology at the same time, which was a skill she had once found charming. Travis. She stood up, wiped her hands on the shop rag, and did not move toward him. He looked around the shop at the sign she had painted at the Snap-on box in the corner at Cody Briggs, who had appeared in the doorway of the parts room and was standing there with a socket wrench in his hand and an expression that said he remembered exactly who Travis Mercer was and exactly what he thought about it. "Nice place," Travis said. "What do you want?" Sadie asked. He shifted his weight, a small movement barely visible, but she knew it. It was the same shift he made before asking for something he already knew the answer should be no to. "I want to talk about the county contract," he said. "My situation has gotten complicated. The audit came back and they're pulling the primary agreement. But there's a reinstatement path. If I come in with a qualified operations partner, the county will consider a modified re-award under a joint venture structure. I put your name forward." Sadie looked at him for a long moment. Her chest felt tight and hot, the specific feeling of being offered something that looks like an opportunity and smells like a trap. "You put my name forward," she repeated. "The contract's worth $300,000 a year, Sadie, split down the middle." "You put my name forward," she said again, "without asking me, for a joint venture with the man who made sure I walked out of 11 years with $40,000 and no paperwork." Her voice was level, controlled, the kind of control that took a long time to learn. "You came here because you need someone to carry you again. The answer is no. The answer will always be no." Travis's jaw tightened. "Be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," Sadie said. "Reasonable is telling you to leave instead of calling Marcus Webb right now and reading him the name Mercer Property Holdings." She held his gaze. "You have about 30 seconds to decide if you want to find out whether I'm serious." Something moved across Travis's face. Not shame exactly, but the nearest thing to it she had ever seen from him. He looked at Cody, who had not moved from the doorway. He looked back at Sadie. Then he walked out. Cody watched the Ram 1500 back out of the lot, turned to Sadie and said, "You want me to finish the Tahoe or do you need a minute?" "Finish the Tahoe," Sadie said. Her hands were trembling slightly, not from fear she knew, but from the particular physical cost of staying that calm for that long. She pressed them flat against the workbench until they steadied. "Hey," Cody said. She looked up. He was young enough that sincerity still came easily to him without the armor adults put around it. "That was the right call, for what it's worth." "It's worth something," Sadie said. "Thank you, Cody." She picked up her shop rag, turned back toward the bay, and got back to work. That evening, she found 3 text messages from Clara on her phone, sent at intervals throughout the afternoon. Each one, a variation of the same request, the same reasoning, the same soft pressure dressed up as needed. The last one read, "Sadie, please. I have nowhere to take them. You have 2 bedrooms. You don't even use the second one. If you say no, you're saying no to Leo and Ruby, not just to me." Sadie read all 3 messages. She set the phone face down on the kitchen counter. She opened the refrigerator, took out the leftover rice and beans she had made Tuesday, and ate standing at the counter in the quiet of the house that had her name on the deed, just hers, no one else's, and thought about what she was going to say in the morning. The call from her mother came at 7:43 in the morning before Sadie had finished her first cup of coffee. Evelyn Vance did not begin with hello. She began with, "I heard what you did to your sister," which Sadie had learned over 38 years, her mother's preferred method of opening any conversation she had already decided the ending to. "Good morning, Mom," Sadie said. "Don't you good morning me?" Evelyn's voice was tight and controlled, the voice of a woman who had been up since 5 rehearsing this. She was 63 years old, had lived in the same house in Boyle Heights for 31 years, and operated on the belief that family was a structure you maintained at any cost, even when the cost was paid entirely by one person. "Clara has nowhere to go, she has 2 babies, and you're sitting in a 2-bedroom house telling her there's no room." "I have one conversation planned with Clara today," Sadie said. "I'd like to have it with Clara. Patricia told me you didn't even let them in the door." "I let them in the door, Mom. I made coffee. I listened for 2 hours. Sadie set her mug down on the counter with a small, deliberate click. "I asked Clara to make a phone call she needed to make. She made it. We're going to talk today. That's where things are." "You talk like this is a business transaction," Evelyn said, and her voice cracked at the edges, not from sadness, Sadie knew, but from frustration at not being able to move her. "That's your sister. That's family." "I know who she is," Sadie said quietly. "I was there when she sat in that courtroom, Mom. Were you?" The line went very still. Evelyn did not answer that question. She said instead, "Patricia is coming with me on Sunday. We're going to come talk to you as a family," and hung up before Sadie could respond. Sadie stood in her kitchen, phone in hand, chest aching in the low, persistent way of someone who has been disappointed so many times by the same people that the disappointment no longer surprises, it just settles in and stays. She went to work. The day moved the way. Busy days do one vehicle after another. Cody handling the oil changes and tire rotations, while Sadie took the diagnostic calls, a 2019 Ford F-350 with a misfiring injector on cylinder 4 that took 3 hours and full attention to properly trace and repair. By 6 in the evening, she was tired in the clean, honest way that came from using her hands and her mind for something real. She was locking the main bay when her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize, then recognized immediately when she read the name at the top. Pastor Glenn Reyes. "Miss Vance, I don't want to intrude, but I thought you should know Clara and the children spent last night in the parking lot at Grace Fellowship. I found them this morning when I came in early. I've given them water and some food from the church kitchen. I wanted you to hear it from me directly, not from someone else." Sadie read the message twice. Then she sat down on the front bumper of the F-250 in the empty lot, the evening air cooling around her, the last of the April sun going flat and orange on the concrete block wall, and let herself feel what she had been managing all day. It hit her harder than she expected, a wave of something that started in her sternum and moved outward hot and awful, the specific pain of loving people who hurt you and being unable to stop. She thought about Ruby's face that first morning, serious and tired and trusting, and something inside her chest pulled so tight it took her breath for a moment. She pressed her fist against her mouth, eyes burning, and sat with it for a full minute before she let herself breathe normally again. She was not going to let Clara move in. That line was real, and it was right, and it was not going to move. But Ruby was 5 years old and had nothing to do with any of this. Sadie called Pastor Glenn directly. He picked up on the second ring. "Pastor Glenn," she said, "I need to ask you to do something for me, and I need you to do it without telling Clara it came from me." "I'm listening," he said. "There's an East Side Inn on Atlantic Boulevard. They have family rooms, 2 queens, they allow children. I want you to call and book the room for 1 week under your church account. I'll send you the money tonight by Zelle, whatever the rate is, plus $100 for incidentals." She paused. "There's El Tepeyac 2 blocks from the church. I'll add enough for meals. Tell Clara the church has an emergency housing fund. Don't use my name." Pastor Glenn was quiet for a moment, not hesitating. She could tell, just absorbing the shape of what she was asking. "You know," he said carefully, "you could just call her yourself." "I know," Sadie said. "But if she knows it's from me, she'll use it as a reason to push harder. I need her to have a safe place to sleep tonight without it becoming a negotiation." Her voice was steady, but her free hand was pressed flat against her knee, holding something down. "Can you do that?" "Yes," Pastor Glenn said simply. "I can do that. Thank you." She transferred the money of $480 for the room, $200 for meals, sat in the truck a moment longer, then drove home. That night, Aunt Patricia sent a group text to what appeared to be approximately 14 family members, including Sadie, that read, "Please pray for Clara and the babies. Some people forget that blood is thicker than water. Sunday we go together and remind them." Sadie read it, put the phone on the charger, and went to bed. She had work in the morning. She had always had work in the morning. That had never stopped being true, and it was not going to stop now. They came at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning, exactly when Aunt Patricia had promised they would. 3 vehicles. Evelyn's Camry in front, followed by Aunt Patricia's Kia, followed by the Honda Odyssey. Clara, it turned out, had been told about the plan, and had not said no, which was its own kind of answer. Sadie was already outside when they pulled in, standing on the front step of the shop in her work boots and her cleanest flannel shirt, holding a mug of coffee with both hands. She had been up since 5. She had made her decision somewhere around 6, eaten breakfast around 7, and spent the remaining hours making sure she was certain. She was certain. Evelyn got out first in her Sunday clothes, the good navy dress, low heels, the silver cross at her collarbone that she wore to church and to confrontations, which in her life had often been the same thing. Aunt Patricia came out of the Kia already talking, already gesturing, a woman who arrived everywhere with the volume preset at 8. Clara stepped out of the Odyssey, last dressed neatly, Leo and Ruby close on either side of her like small satellites. "Sadie." Evelyn stopped 3 feet in front of her and crossed her arms. Her voice was tight and formal, the voice she used when she had decided emotion was a liability. "We're here because this has gone on long enough. Clara needs a place to stay. You have the room. This is family, and in this family we don't turn our backs on each other." Aunt Patricia added, "Amen to that," which was not a word she reserved exclusively for church. Sadie looked at her mother. She looked at her aunt. She looked at Clara, who was watching her with an expression caught somewhere between hope and dread, one hand resting on Ruby's shoulder. "I heard you," Sadie said. "Now I need you to hear me." She turned and walked into the shop office. "Clara, come in. Just you." Evelyn stepped forward. "We're all here together." "Mom." Sadie's voice was quiet and absolute. The voice of someone who had stopped asking for permission a long time ago. "It'll be 5 minutes. You can wait in the yard." She went inside without looking back to see if they followed her instructions. She knew they would because she had stopped being afraid of what happened if they didn't. Clara came through the door a moment later, hands knotted together at her waist, eyes bright and wet already. Sadie picked up a manila folder from the desk. She had prepared it Friday night. organized it Saturday morning, checked it twice before bed, and held it out to her sister. "This is what I can do," she said. "Open it." Clara took the folder with shaking hands. She opened it. Inside were two documents paper-clipped separately. The first was a printed confirmation from Timber Run Apartments on Atlantic Boulevard, a two-bedroom unit, children welcome available the following Friday. The security deposit of $3,300 had been paid in full in Clara's name from Sadie's personal checking account. The first month's rent was not included. That was intentional. The second was a typed job description on Vance Heavy and Auto Repair letterhead, front desk coordinator, schedule manager, part-time 25 hours per week, rate $1,800 per hour, start date, Monday. Below the description, a single handwritten line in Sadie's printing. "This is a real job. It pays a real wage. It has real expectations. If you want it, it's yours." Clara stared at the papers. Her chin was trembling. When she finally looked up, her eyes were spilling over, tears tracking down both cheeks freely, and her voice came out broken and small. "Sadie, you already paid the deposit." "I did. Why would you do that before I even—" "Because I wanted you to know the offer was real before you decided," Sadie said. "Maybe not. Not a condition. It's done. The apartment is yours whether you take the job or not." She paused. "But I think you should take the job. Not for me. For you. Because you are 34 years old, and you have never once had a paycheck that was only yours, and I think you need to know what that feels like." Clara pressed the back of her hand against her mouth, a gesture so like the one she had made in the driveway 6 days ago that Sadie felt it move through her like an echo. Her shoulders heaved once, twice, and then she pulled herself together with a visible physical effort, the way someone does when they are deciding to be different than they have been. "Monday?" Clara asked. 8 o'clock, Sadie said. "Don't be late." Outside, Evelyn received the summary of the offer with her arms still crossed and her jaw set. When Sadie finished, she said, "That's not how family works. The family doesn't charge each other rent and give each other job descriptions." "That's how this family works now," Sadie said. "I'm not turning my back on Clara. I'm standing her up. Those are different things." Evelyn looked at her for a long moment, searching for the opening she had always found before the soft place she could press to make Sadie fold. She didn't find it. Her expression shifted into something Sadie had rarely seen from her. Not anger, not hurt, but a kind of bewildered grief, as though she was looking at her daughter and not quite recognizing the landscape. "I don't know who you've become," Evelyn said. "I know exactly who I've become," Sadie said. "That's the difference." Evelyn walked to her car. Aunt Patricia opened her mouth, thought better of it, and followed. Clara stood in the gravel with the folder against her chest, Leo pulling at her sleeve, asking what was happening. Ruby with her bear watching Sadie with those serious, trusting eyes. "Go get settled at the motel," Sadie said. "I'll see you Monday at 8. Clara nodded. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Sadie." "Thank you for showing up," Sadie said. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday morning in Pomona, Rick Dominguez brought his gavel down on Lot 14 at the Mercer Fleet Asset Liquidation Auction, a rotary FJ35 wheel alignment lift, operational starting bid, $4,200. Sadie stood in the third row with her bidder's card and raised it at $4,800. No one came back to her. Travis sat in the front row in a jacket she still didn't recognize, required by the court to be present for the asset dissolution. He saw her raise the card. He saw the gavel fall. He looked at the floor. Rick Dominguez handed her the receipt. She folded it into her shirt pocket where it sat against her sternum the whole drive home, small and clean and entirely hers. 4 months later, Dottie Pruitt drove from Koreatown to East LA on a Sunday morning, the first time Sadie had ever known her to leave the neighborhood on a weekend, and arrived at Vance Heavy, with 2 coffees from the place on Vermont Avenue that Sadie had been going to since high school. She stood in the doorway of the shop and looked at everything, the sign, the bays, the snap-on box in the corner, under Art Vance's photograph. Clara at the front desk, on the phone with a parts supplier, Cody Briggs, underneath the 2022 Ram 2500 in Bay 1. "Art Vance would be very proud of you," Dottie said. Not would have been, would be, present tense. The way people speak about someone when they believe that love doesn't fully stop. Sadie's throat tightened. She took the coffee. They stood in the doorway together, not performing anything, not resolving anything, just two women in the morning light of a place that had been built honestly and was still standing. "Come on," Sadie said after a moment. 15 minutes, that was always the rule. Dottie smiled wide and real and a little bit like she had been waiting for that exact sentence. "Still got the rule," she said. "Good girl." They went inside. A week after Dottie's visit, Marcus Webb called on a Tuesday afternoon while Sadie was writing up a repair estimate. He identified himself, asked if she had a moment, and when she said yes, he said, "The county is reopening the primary fleet maintenance contract. Full scope 47 vehicles plus auxiliaries. Your operation qualifies for primary consideration. I'd like to send you the RFP packet." Sadie set down her pen. She looked at the shop through the office window at Cody, working at Clara scheduling at the Snap-on box in its corner, at the sign above the door that said her name and nothing else. "Send it," she said. She picked up her pen and went back to the estimate. There was a customer waiting. There was always a customer waiting, and she had never once left one waiting longer than necessary. Outside the gravel lot sat quiet and solid in the afternoon sun, the wooden sign throwing a short shadow eastward. "Fair weight cash tender 0 favors," her father's words, her walls, her name on the deed. Just hers. That was enough. That had always been enough. She had just needed 3 years, $40,000, one old mechanic's faith, and the absolute refusal to become anyone's safety net again, to finally believe it.